Love, betrayal, and shattered illusions can turn even the most lavish life into a battlefield of secrets. This is the tumultuous story of James Harrington, a powerful millionaire whose gleaming success hid a precarious truth. While his beloved wife, Catherine, carried his unborn child, a bold, desperate mistress demanded marriage in the shadows. The stakes were high, and lives dangled in the balance. A single miscalculation threatened to unravel fortunes and reputations, as cunning lawyers, old family feuds, and unexpected allies swarmed to seize their chance. Brace yourself for a roller coaster of power, plays heartbreak and redemption in Mistress Demanded Marriage. From the Millionaire. His pregnant wife. Filed first, James Harrington was born into privilege, but not the grotesque variety that destroyed a child's character. Instead, he hailed from a lineage of discreet old money in Boston, money that had come from Harrington Industries, a family-owned steel conglomerate. After Harvard, James had taken the company's helm with a fierce determination to expand into global markets. By his early 30s, James had made the Forbes list of America's most promising young business leaders. Growing up, he was as average as any other boy in the suburbs, except that his house had 9 bedrooms and a guest cottage. His mother, the late Victoria Harrington, was known for her unwavering, philanthropic efforts and calm spirit. She taught James that wealth was not a free ticket to arrogance. Instead, it was a responsibility. His father, Charles Harrington, had been the driving force behind James's sense of ambition and unwavering discipline. Under Charles's guidance, James learned that loyalty and family came first. Even so, success brought with it a labyrinth of complications. James, at 36, had countless accolades, an enviable personal fortune, and a Manhattan penthouse that overlooked Central Park. Though quiet in the tabloids, the Harrington family name still sparkled with respect. He had married Catherine Anderson. Now, Catherine Harrington, 5 years ago, in a lavish yet tasteful ceremony in Martha's Vineyard, Catherine came from a more modest upbringing, her father being a local attorney, and her mother a passionate high school teacher. Their love seemed like the type that burned steadily, rather than flaring up uncontrollably. They were seen as the perfect power couple, respectable, philanthropic, and gracefully wealthy. Yet behind that facade, a disquiet settled over the Harrington household. Catherine, now 4 months pregnant, had begun to sense a subtle shift in James's behavior, a heaviness on his shoulders, and a subtle guilt behind his eyes. Late-night meetings became more frequent. He'd linger too long on his phone, stepping out of the room to take certain calls. When Catherine tried to ask about his day, James gave only clipped answers or polite diversions. She was not naive. Her intuition told her something was amiss. James, for his part, felt trapped in a vortex of shame and dread. He knew logically that an affair with Eleanor Ramirez, a stunning Argentine business consultant, violated every principle hammered into his conscience. He knew betrayal would destroy Catherine, who had always stood by him, patiently encouraging him through challenging mergers, cutting corners in her own life, to support him. James also understood the weight that an affair carried when his wife was pregnant with their first child, and yet desire and temptation had proven too potent. The stage was set for an unforgettable drama, though no one quite realized just how swiftly everything would spiral into chaos. When Elena demanded James leave, Catherine marry her, and publicly commit the entire tapestry of James's carefully curated world, threatened to tear Elena Ramirez's entry into James's life, was as unexpected as a lightning bolt on a clear day. She was visiting New York from Buenos Aires on a 3-month consulting contract for Harrington Industries. Word traveled fast through the offices that Elena was a talented strategist with a flair for marketing expansions in South America, Standing at nearly 6 feet tall with dark hair flowing in glamorous waves, she carried herself with a striking confidence. Elena's professional brilliance was complemented by an almost magnetic charm. Executives revered her for innovative, borderline daring proposals, ones that James found equal parts intriguing and refreshing. After years of dealing with the same board members, the same attorneys, and the same old patterns, Elena's arrival felt like a jolt to his system. Despite her beauty and poise, Elena didn't come across as a typical corporate climber. She was direct, unafraid to speak her mind. Within weeks, James found himself looking forward to their meetings, surprised at how easily their conversations drifted from company expansions to personal anecdotes, from marketing strategies to sly flirtations. He tried to rein himself in, but the lines soon blurred. The adrenaline rush he felt working alongside Elena morphed into a deeper, more intimate closeness. They began meeting for drinks under the guise of brainstorming sessions at the Mark Hotel's bar or quiet corners of upscale lounges in Midtown. Elena, though, was no star-struck admirer. She had her own ambitions. She was raised in a household riddled by her father's gambling problems, which left the family finances in perpetual crisis. Since her teenage years, Elena had seen money as the ultimate fortress. If you had it, you could shield yourself from heartbreak, from shame, from fear. Now in her early 30s, she was determined to secure her future. Her path crossed with James at just the right time. She found him not only irresistible but also beneficial. One late evening, after a particularly long day of contract negotiations, they ended up alone in James's office. Documents were strewn across the mahogany table, and the city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Elena cracked a joke about how she might end up sleeping in the office if they didn't wrap up. James offered to get them dinner delivered instead. Their conversation wandered from childhood memories to company politics. The tension built slowly until an undeniable spark of attraction passed between them. A simple brush of hands, a lingering gaze, and in a moment of impulse, they shared a kiss. It was their first mistake, the one that opened the door to countless more. A clandestine relationship sprouted from that night. Guilt ate at James, but the thrill of Elena's presence overrode it whenever he was near her. For Elena, it was the confirmation she needed. She had him. With each passing day, their affair sank deeper roots, branching into elaborate lies, covert phone calls and hush-hush outings. Catherine at home sensed James's absence. He would arrive late, claiming pressing deadlines and emergencies that demanded his attention. Catherine tried to be understanding. After all, leading a multinational corporation was no small responsibility, and James had always had periods of intense work. But something felt different this time. She could read it in the way James's eyes darted away when she tried to meet his gaze, the way he seemed distant even in bed. Her pregnancy made her more sensitive, more vulnerable, and that vulnerability only fed her suspicions. Meanwhile, Elena began to push boundaries. Initially content with clandestine encounters and hush-hush dinners, she soon wanted more. She wanted the promises that come with real commitment. She wanted to stand by James publicly, not merely be his well-kept secret. Her confidence soared when she overheard James on the phone with Catherine using tired excuses that even Elena recognized as flimsy. She thought, if his marriage was so easily neglected, maybe it was a sign that it was already on its way out. By the time Elena demanded that James leave Catherine, the trap was set. Her ultimatum was bold and unwavering. She wanted to be the new Mrs. Harrington. One early morning, as Catherine lay in bed, she scrolled through social media to distract herself from the wave of morning sickness. She came across a photograph posted by a mutual acquaintance, someone at Harrington Industries. In the background of the image, she spotted Elena speaking intimately to James in a corner of a conference hall. Their body language, the closeness of their heads, the slight brushing of James's hand against Elena's elbow sent a shiver down Catherine's spine. Catherine had worked hard to be a poised wife. She prided herself on not jumping to conclusions or staging baseless confrontations. But the seed of suspicion planted in her mind refused to remain dormant. She decided to investigate further quietly. A day later, she called her friend Samantha Lee, who also worked for Harrington Industries in the Public Relations Department. Samantha was known for her discretion and loyalty. During a private lunch at the Gramercy Tavern, Samantha hesitantly confirmed Catherine's worst fears. James and Elena had been spending an unusual amount of time together. Samantha had walked in on them once in a closed conference room, noticing the tension in the air far too personal for a standard meeting. Though Samantha couldn't provide explicit proof of an affair, her tone suggested that Catherine needed to brace herself. Meanwhile, James was facing relentless pressure from Eleanor. Their affair had evolved from secret indulgence to outright confrontation. Lena would corner him after board meetings with tearful demands. She insisted she'd given him everything: her mind, her heart, her body, her ideas that had led to some of Harrington Industries' latest successes in South American markets. All she wanted in return was the public commitment James had promised, or at least implied, during their more impassioned nights. Elena was no fool. She picked up on James's reluctance, sensed the undertow of his guilt, and the looming presence of his pregnant wife. Instead of backing down, Elena gave him an ultimatum: divorce. Catherine, or I walk away, and believe me, I'll have plenty to say on my way out. This threat caused James's stomach to knot. He knew the consequences: a scandal that would torpedo his family's reputation, possibly jeopardize business deals worth hundreds of millions. Worst of all, he felt an abiding shame about betraying Catherine and the child she carried, torn between fear and lust, responsibility and desire. James vacillated, making half-promises to Eleanor he wasn't sure he could keep. At home, Catherine found herself in a swirl of confusion. Her pregnancy made her more emotional, but it also fueled a protective instinct. She considered confronting James directly, but each time she looked into his eyes, her heart clenched. She realized that she wasn't the only one to consider now. She had to think of their unborn child's future. So she bit her tongue, waiting for the right moment, collecting scraps of information until she had concrete proof. That moment arrived one night when James stepped out onto their penthouse balcony to take a phone call. Normally he'd speak softly, almost in a whisper. But Catherine caught him sounding desperate and pleading. She quietly inched toward the glass door. Through a small gap, she made out Elena's name, heard James beg for more time. He was pleading with her not to rush into any decisions. Catherine's heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. She retreated to the bedroom, tears burning her eyes as the truth exploded into certainty. The betrayal was real. She understood now that James's strange behavior was not a misunderstanding or an overblown suspicion. He had a mistress, and the mistress wanted more. News of an imminent shift in Harrington Industries' board structure provided a temporary distraction in James's life. An old friend of his father, Robert Townsend, who owned a substantial percentage of the company's shares, began hinting at stepping down from his seat. The board members and shareholders were abuzz with speculation. Townsend's seat would be pivotal, and the timing of any changes in leadership would either strengthen or threaten James's grip on the company. Amid these corporate upheavals, James struggled to keep his personal life from imploding. Elena grew impatient, tired of waiting in the shadows. She was not content to remain a secret any longer. Her repeated demands and even subtle threats became more frequent. She knew timing was everything. If James wanted to avoid an ugly scandal, right when the board was in flux, he might be more inclined to meet her demands. Catherine, however, was playing her own hand. She quietly visited a prominent divorce attorney named Geraldine Pierce, a steely-eyed woman in her 50s with an impeccable track record of representing high-profile clients. Catherine walked into Geraldine's Park Avenue office feeling nauseous. Every step felt treacherous, as if she were betraying James simply by consulting a lawyer. But the truth was, Catherine had to protect herself, and more importantly, her child. Geraldine listened carefully, her expression revealing little emotion, as Catherine recounted her suspicions and the phone call she overheard. The attorney asked pointed, practical questions. Did Catherine have any proof of the affair? What assets were in her name? Was there a prenuptial agreement? Catherine explained that she had no concrete proof, aside from overheard phone calls and suspicious photographs. She admitted that yes, there was a prenuptial agreement, but it mostly protected James's holdings in Harrington Industries. Geraldine, speaking in that crisp, matter-of-fact voice, assured Catherine that it was possible to negotiate a favorable settlement. Even with the prenuptial infidelity, changes the conversation in court, she said, particularly if you're pregnant. Judges, especially in New York, may look more harshly upon a husband who steps out while his wife is carrying his child, and if you can show how it impacts the well-being of the mother and child, we have leverage. Catherine left the office, feeling a grim sense of empowerment. There was a plan, an option, a shield if need be. Yet she still wrestled with heartbreak. She couldn't bring herself to hate James. She remembered the gentleman who had proposed to her on the beach in Martha's Vineyard, the devoted partner who nursed her through a bad bout of pneumonia 2 years ago. How had they arrived at this dark turning point? All the while, James found himself cornered. Elena scheduled a surprise business trip to Miami, insisting that James come along to finalize negotiations with a Latin American partner. She emphasized that his presence was absolutely crucial. James knew it was a ruse. Elena simply wanted them to be alone, somewhere away from Catherine. He was torn. If he didn't go, he risked Elena's wrath, which could lead to her going public about the affair. If he did go, he'd be betraying Catherine on an even larger scale. The morning of the Miami trip, Catherine watched James pack a small suitcase with well-ironed suits and ties. He avoided her gaze, claiming the trip was strictly professional. Catherine forced a polite smile, resisting the urge to ask if Eleanor would be there. She knew the answer, and she knew it would only rip open her wounds. Instead, she retreated to the bathroom, under the guise of feeling unwell, blaming it on morning sickness, while tears silently streaked down her cheeks. The Miami trip was a pressure cooker of duplicity. James and Eleanor stayed in separate suites at the iconic Fontainebleau, but the arrangement was purely for appearances. After concluding a negotiation session at a local partner's office, they reconvened in Eleanor's suite, where they allowed their affair to ignite once more. Yet the moment the afterglow faded, Elena hammered home her demands. She asked James if he'd called his lawyer, yet if he'd discussed divorce with Catherine. She wanted specifics, dates, timelines, formal announcements. That evening, James glanced at the ring on his finger, etched with the date of his marriage to Catherine Waves. Of guilt nearly submerged him. But Elena's pressure was relentless. She threatened that if James did not make a decisive move by the following week, she'd have no choice but to approach a gossip columnist she knew in the city. She claimed to have proof of their affair, text messages, voicemails, photos. She dangled the possibility of a humiliating scandal in front of him. While James was descending into this spiral, Catherine was not idle back in New York. She asked her friend Samantha to discreetly gather whatever evidence she could find of James and Elena's interactions at work. Samantha, who knew the corporate environment, quietly pulled email records that hinted at after-hours meetings between James and Elena. She also compiled photos from multiple social gatherings, each one showing the couple in a corner, conversing with an intimacy that belied standard co-worker relationships. Catherine's heart sank each time she uncovered more. She felt nauseous, not just from her pregnancy, but also from the grief of seeing tangible evidence of James's betrayal. Yet she steeled herself for what might come. If James tried to spin stories or paint Catherine as the unstable pregnant wife, imagining things, she would have proof to protect herself and her unborn child. In Miami, the final negotiation day arrived. Elena, wearing a sharp red suit that highlighted her striking features, fielded questions from the Latin American representatives. She skillfully guided the conversation, impressing everyone in the room. James felt conflicting emotions swirl inside him: admiration for her brilliance, regret at the ruinous situation he'd allowed to develop, and fear for the fallout that loomed. That night their business concluded. Elena pressed James harder than ever. She insisted on a stroll down the glamorous boardwalk under the moonlight. Once they were alone, she pleaded and threatened in the same breath. She told him she was done waiting. He had a week, just one, to begin divorce proceedings or face her full wrath. James, exhausted and anxious, tried to reason. "I need time, Elena," he said, voice quivering. "Catherine, she's pregnant. She's expecting my child. I can't just walk away." Elena's eyes flashed. "So your wife's pregnancy means I have to keep living a lie." "What about our future, James? You told me you wanted a life with me, not just these secret encounters. If that was a lie, then I need to know. But if it's true, it's time to act." The tension escalated. James realized that Elena was not bluffing. Her eyes brimmed with tears, and behind them, a fierce determination. If he didn't give her what she wanted, she would not hesitate to burn everything down. As they argued in low, urgent voices near the ocean, the gentle hiss of the tide became the soundtrack to a chapter in James's life that threatened to destroy him. James returned from Miami late in the evening, dragging his suitcase into the foyer of the Harrington penthouse. He found Catherine seated in the living room, reading through some documents. She was calm, too. Calm for someone who was supposed to be happily awaiting her husband's return. He greeted her with a weary kiss on the cheek, which she accepted but did not reciprocate. After a tense silence, Catherine spoke. "How was Miami productive?" James nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, the negotiations went well." Catherine studied him. Her voice took on a somber tone. "I'm glad. Now we need to talk about something." James's heart hammered against his chest. He tried to appear nonchalant, but anxiety stiffened his posture. "All right. What's on your mind?" Catherine pulled a folder from the coffee table and handed it to him. Inside were printouts of emails between him and Elena, some business-related, but with personal notes slipped in, references to late dinners, inside jokes, photos from corporate events. James's face went pale, and his hands shook as he flipped through the pages. "Catherine," he began, his voice catching. She held up a hand to stop him. "Don't insult me by pretending this is all innocent. I know. I've known for a while. I just needed the proof." James stared at the floor, shame crawling up his neck. For a moment, he was at a loss for words, his mind spinning with excuses, apologies, anything that might soften the blow. But he realized it was pointless. Catherine had him cornered. She rose from her seat, standing tall despite her pregnancy. "I deserve an explanation," she said, her voice trembling, yet resolute. "I'm carrying your child, James. We were supposed to be a family." Tears pooled in her eyes, and James felt his own throat tighten. He tried to reach out to her, but she stepped back. "Catherine, I never meant for this to happen," he stammered. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake." Her jaw clenched. A mistake is forgetting our anniversary or missing a doctor's appointment. An affair isn't a mistake. It's a choice. You chose her repeatedly over me. There was a moment of charged silence. The city skyline glittered outside their windows, indifferent to the crisis unfolding within. Finally, Catherine spoke again, her voice calmer but colder. "I met with a lawyer. James's heart plummeted. You did." She nodded. "Yes, I've started putting things in motion. I don't want to do this. But you've left me no choice. I have to protect myself and the baby." He tried to form words of apology, to beg for forgiveness. But Catherine was resolute. She explained that if he wanted to salvage anything, he needed to come clean, tell her the entire truth. But for now, her decision stood. She had the upper hand, and she intended to use it. By the time they ended the conversation, night had turned to early morning. Catherine retreated to the guest bedroom, leaving James in the living room, staring at the damning evidence. He felt too numb to speak, to cry, to do anything but exist in a fog of regret. James awoke in a fog of exhaustion, sunlight bleeding through the penthouse curtains. His body ached from sleeping upright on the living room couch, but it was nothing compared to the pressure in his chest. Catherine had gone to the guest bedroom after confronting him the night before. He hadn't slept. How could he? The folder of incriminating emails still sat on the coffee table, its presence as damning as a courtroom gavel. James rubbed his face and groaned, dreading what the day would bring. His phone buzzed repeatedly, breaking the silence. Dozens of unread messages from Eleanor. "We need to talk. You promised me this wouldn't drag on. If you think you can ghost me, think again." Then came the final one. "Meet me today. 2 p.m. that place on West 78th. If you don't show, I make my move." James stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. He knew the restaurant. She meant an upscale Italian bistro tucked away in the Upper West Side, discreet enough for illicit meetings, but posh enough to soothe Elena's ego. He showered quickly, threw on a blazer, and left without saying a word to Catherine. She didn't stop him. She didn't even look up from her chair in the sunroom, where she sat sipping peppermint tea with a blanket draped over her lap. Her silence was more devastating than any shouted curse. By 2 p.m., James was seated in a dark booth near the rear of the restaurant. Elena was already there, sunglasses perched on her head, a half-empty glass of rosé sweating on the white linen tablecloth. She didn't smile. "You kept me waiting," she said flatly. "Elena, I'm here," he replied, weary. "Yes, and about 3 weeks late." The waitress appeared to take their order, but Elena waved her off with a tight smile. The air between them was thick with tension. James noticed she looked different, sharper, angrier. Her usual elegance was still intact, but it carried a brittleness now like a porcelain doll about to crack. "You told me," she said, leaning in, "that you would leave her, that we'd go public, that you were finally going to stop sneaking around like some coward. And now she knows, and you're still hesitating. I didn't expect Catherine to find out like this," he said quietly. "I didn't have time to prepare." Elena's eyes narrowed. You had time. You just didn't have the courage. James sighed and looked away. Catherine is pregnant. Do you understand what that means? I'm not just ending a marriage. I'm breaking a family before it even begins. Don't you dare pull the fatherhood card on me. Elena snapped. You've had months to prepare for this. You had no problem betraying your marriage when you were in my bed. But now that it's inconvenient, you're suddenly a saint. I made a mistake, James said, voice trembling. A huge one, but that doesn't mean I can just bulldoze everything and start fresh with you like nothing happened. Her laugh was short and bitter. Fresh, James. You've already bulldozed everything. Your wife is filing for divorce. Your affair is hanging by a thread. Your reputation is bleeding out on the floor. If you walk away now, you lose everything anyway. James rubbed his temples. What do you want from me? Elena, I want what you promised. A future. A public statement. A clean break from her. I want to be treated like a partner, not your dirty little secret. He stared at her, unable to speak. The walls felt like they were closing in. Eleanor, relentless, leaned forward and said the words he'd been dreading. You have 48 hours, she hissed. Either you go public with our relationship and begin divorce proceedings in earnest, or I go to the press. I have texts, voicemails, photos, everything. The blood drained from James's face. You'd destroy me. She didn't blink, no. You destroyed yourself. I'll just be telling the truth. As she stood to leave, she tossed a $100 bill on the table and grabbed her purse. Tick-tock, James. He sat there for a long time after she left, his head spinning. He didn't even notice the waiter come and go, clearing untouched water glasses. The weight of his double life was finally collapsing on top of him, and he had no idea which way to turn. That evening, as if orchestrated by fate itself, Catherine received an envelope delivered by hand to the penthouse. No return address, no note. Just a typed message on crisp ivory paper. Your husband will leave you for me. You can't stop it. Catherine stared at it for a long time, heart pounding. Her breath came in short gasps, her hand crumpling the paper. She had suspected Eleanor was bold, but this was war. She paced the living room, fury coursing through her like electricity. Then calmly, she set the letter on the coffee table and waited. James returned after 10 p.m., looking like a man who had been through a storm. His tie was loose, his shoulders sagging and his face drawn. Catherine didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply gestured to the note. She sent this, she said, her voice low. James stepped closer, read the paper, and visibly flinched. Jesus Christ, tell me, Catherine said, crossing her arms. Does she expect you to marry her? He nodded, slowly. Tears threatening? Yes. She gave me an ultimatum. 48 hours or she tells the press everything. Catherine's expression didn't change. But inside, she felt a dam break. Then we're done. She said each word like a gavel strike. I'm filing for divorce immediately. Wait, Catherine, please. James pleaded. What about the baby? The babies? She corrected, coldly twins. James staggered back as if he'd been hit. Her voice cracked but stayed strong. I'll make sure they're safe and cared for. But you've lost the right to call yourself my husband. And if you think this mistress of yours will make you happy, then by all means. Go build your empire on the ashes of this one. James dropped onto the sofa, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. For a man who had built an empire from nothing, he looked suddenly like a boy, lost, broken, and terrified. Catherine didn't wait for a response. She walked upstairs, closing the bedroom door behind her. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt a small but fierce clarity. She had been the devoted wife, the peacemaker, the understanding partner. But now she was a mother twice over, and a woman with nothing left to lose. And that made her the most dangerous thing of all. True to her word, Catherine filed for divorce the next morning. The story leaked to a small local gossip blog the following day, then ballooned onto page 6 within hours. The initial headlines were cryptic: Harrington's marriage on the rocks. But soon they exploded into full-blown scandal when an insider rumored to be Eleanor herself spilled details about the affair. Social media caught fire. Everyone from society, columnists to random strangers on Twitter, weighed in. Some sympathized with Catherine, outraged that James would cheat on his pregnant wife. Others played armchair psychologists, speculating that James had been seduced by a foreign consultant. Elena's name began circulating, and while she had no official statement yet, she fueled the gossip by posting cryptic quotes about betrayal and destiny on her Instagram stories. At Harrington Industries, tension reigned. Board members held closed-door meetings, strategizing how to handle the bad press. Robert Townsend, who was on the verge of stepping down, reconsidered his plans, fearing that a scandal this large might destabilize the company. In a tense board meeting, James faced a barrage of questions. Some worried that his personal disgrace would erode investors' confidence. Others worried about the moral implications of standing by a CEO who'd abandoned his pregnant wife. Meanwhile, Catherine, guided by Geraldine Pierce, prepared for a high-stakes divorce proceeding. The prenuptial agreement was thorough, but Geraldine found potential openings. Public scandal, especially involving infidelity during pregnancy, could influence a judge's rulings, especially regarding spousal support custody, and possibly renegotiations of certain clauses. James scrambled to find a reputable divorce attorney. He enlisted Michael Hamilton, an old classmate from Harvard Law School. Michael tried to calm James, emphasizing they needed a strong PR angle to quell the public outcry. You need to issue a statement expressing regret, a desire to make amends, and a commitment to your child. Michael advised, show yourself as remorseful, not belligerent. Public opinion matters here. In a carefully crafted press release, James apologized for mistakes made in his personal life and asked for privacy during the divorce. He vowed to support Catherine and their unborn child. Elena, however, was furious at the release, reading it as James's attempt to salvage some dignity and possibly pave the way for a reconciliation with Catherine. She sent him furious texts accusing him of leaving her out of the narrative. She threatened again to speak directly with top-tier tabloids to give them her exclusive story. As the scandal intensified, Catherine found refuge at her parents' home in Westchester. Her father, Stephen Anderson, was livid at the disrespect shown to his daughter. He offered any financial help she might need to fight James in court. Her mother, Julia Anderson, tried to console Catherine, reminding her that no matter how brutal the tabloids got, she had a future beyond this heartbreak, especially once she held her baby in her arms. The next blow landed when Catherine's legal team subpoenaed James's financial records and corporate emails to prove the affair's timeline. Harrington Industries lawyers balked. Company emails were proprietary, and there were NDAs to consider. But in a divorce case, the lines blurred, especially if Catherine's side argued that James abused company resources for personal misconduct. In a sudden dramatic twist, Robert Townsend floated the idea that James might need to step down as CEO either permanently or temporarily if the scandal reached too high a fever pitch. That prospect shook James to his core. Losing Catherine was devastating, but losing Harrington Industries, the family legacy he'd spent his life preserving, was the final blow he couldn't stomach. Behind the scenes, Elena saw her grand ambitions slipping away. She had envisioned a swift end to James's marriage and a triumphant wedding for herself. But the reality was far more complicated. James's legal entanglements, plus the negative public image swirling around them, had dampened her fantasies. She found herself ostracized at corporate events. Once people recognized her as the Mistress. They froze her out. Colleagues whispered behind her back. Invitations to certain high-profile gatherings vanished, desperate to salvage her own status. Elena considered her next moves carefully. Should she expose every detail of their relationship to force James's hand? Or would doing so only isolate her further from the very social circles she hoped to join as Mrs. Harrington? In a Hail Mary attempt, Eleanor scheduled a meeting with Robert Townsend. She dressed conservatively, pitched her professional value to the company, and argued that she had been integral to the expansion in South America. She insinuated that her relationship with James was a personal matter, and that it didn't negate her expertise. Townsend listened politely, but made no promises. He did, however, mention that the board would likely prefer if Eleanor resigned once her consulting contract ended. The negative publicity was too great a liability. Infuriated, Eleanor began drafting an explosive letter detailing James's manipulative behavior, broken promises, and intimate details of their affair. She planned to send it to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, maybe even the Washington Post. If James and the Harrington board wanted to erase her, she'd burn the entire facade down with the truth of how they used her brilliance, but cast her aside the moment things got complicated. Meanwhile, Catherine's pregnancy progressed. She struggled through emotional turmoil, anger, sadness, betrayal. Yet she felt moments of clarity whenever she felt her baby move. With each flutter and kick, she was reminded of the life she now protected. She resolved to fight for full custody to ensure that James's chaotic personal life didn't damage their child's stability. Geraldine Pierce, always pragmatic, prepared for a ruthless battle in court if necessary. During one of Catherine's mandatory mediation sessions, an attempt at amicable resolution, James arrived with Michael Hamilton. The tension in the conference room was palpable. Catherine refused to look James in the eye, focusing instead on her attorney's notes. The mediator tried to keep things orderly, but it was a lost cause. James' voice, trembling, offered a significant settlement, a sizable monthly allowance, the penthouse apartment, and a trust fund for the child. Catherine refused, stating that she was not a commodity to be bought off. She demanded that James publicly distance himself from Eleanor, finalize a fair co-parenting agreement, and hand over certain Harrington Industries shares that had been earmarked for the family. James balked at the latter, aware that the board was already suspicious of him. Catherine's voice shook with controlled rage. "If you think your mistress is worth losing your legacy, keep stalling, I won't budge." James's eyes flickered with regret and frustration. He attempted to explain that it was more complicated than Catherine realized, but she'd heard enough. She ended the session abruptly, leaving James slumped in his chair, while Michael Hamilton scrambled to figure out damage control. The sterile scent of antiseptic and soft hum of fluorescent lights filled the air as Catherine sat on the edge of the examination table. Her OB-GYN Dr. Valerie Mendez tapped gently at the ultrasound machine, her brow furrowing with the kind of curiosity that made any expectant mother tense. Catherine, in her 7th month, clutched the edge of the paper-lined table, her heart thudding slightly faster than usual. "Is something wrong?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Dr. Mendez glanced at the screen, then back at Catherine, her expression unreadable. "No, not wrong," she said carefully, adjusting the transducer and gliding it again across Catherine's belly. "But I do have a surprise. A moment later, the doctor smiled. "Catherine, you're having twins." The words echoed through the room like a dropped crystal vase. Shocking, beautiful, and impossible to ignore. Catherine blinked. "What? 2 babies?" Dr. Mendez confirmed, pointing to the screen. "Twin boys. Healthy heartbeats. Perfect growth rate. It seems one was hiding behind the other during earlier scans. That can happen." Catherine stared at the black and white blur on the monitor. 2 heartbeats. 2 lives. 2 sons. Tears welled in her eyes, not from joy alone, but from the crushing realization that she would be raising them alone. What had once been a dream, starting a family with the man she loved, had splintered into something unrecognizable. Her hands moved instinctively to cradle her belly, suddenly aware of the immense responsibility doubling before her. She barely remembered the ride home. The world outside her car window passed in a blur of grey buildings and wind-swept streets. As the news settled in her chest like a stone in water, her emotions swirled into a quiet storm. Hope, fear, exhaustion, and a dull ache of betrayal. Every kick from within reminded her of what she had to protect, even if the man who helped create these lives was unraveling. That evening, she sat in her dimly lit kitchen, the sonogram images spread before her like sacred relics. She debated whether to tell James. Part of her wanted to shut him out completely, to shield her sons from a man whose loyalty had shattered under the weight of lust and ego. But another part, a stubbornly ethical part, knew he had a right to know. She tapped out a short, blunt text. "It's twins boys, doctor, confirmed today. Just letting you know. No greeting, no warmth, just the truth." James received the message during a board prep meeting at Harrington Industries. He glanced at his phone, and for a moment, everything else fell away. The PowerPoint slides, the financial charts, the murmurs of his colleagues. His breath caught in his throat. Twins? He left the meeting abruptly, ignoring the concerned glances from his assistant and PR manager. Once alone in his office, he sank into the leather chair and stared out at the Manhattan skyline. The gravity of what he'd done now doubled in scope. 2 lives, 2 sons who might grow up without seeing their father as anything more than a headline. A tidal wave of regret rolled over him. The image of Catherine at their wedding flashed through his mind, her radiant smile, the promise in her eyes. And now she was preparing to bring 2 boys into the world without him. James made a decision. It wasn't strategic or calculated. It came from the gut, the kind of clarity born of hitting rock bottom. He picked up his phone and for the last time called Elena. When she didn't answer, he sent a final message. "I'm ending this. I'm sorry. Please don't contact me again." Then he blocked her number, her email, and every social media handle he could think of. He directed his assistants to remove her from all upcoming meeting invitations and reassigned her consulting responsibilities to someone else. Elena didn't take the silence lightly. That night, James's phone was bombarded by unknown numbers, some calls, some messages, some voicemails too explicit to be mistaken for anyone but her. Her desperation leapt off the screen. Threats, pleas, accusations. By morning, he was trending on gossip blogs again. A popular entertainment site published screenshots of intimate texts between James and Elena, complete with time-stamped photos of hotel hallways, blurry kisses, and flirtatious messages laced with pet names. The leak was unmistakably coordinated and intentional. Panic erupted at Harrington Industries. The PR team scrambled to contain the damage, issuing vague statements about invasion of privacy and fabricated content. Though the evidence looked damning, investors started asking questions. Stock prices wobbled, and then came the final blow. Robert Townsend called an emergency board meeting. The room was silent as Townsend cleared his throat. "James, this has gone far enough, or your personal choices are threatening the integrity of this company. As of today, you're being placed on temporary leave as CEO, pending an internal review." James didn't argue. He couldn't. He simply nodded, numb, and stood to leave the room where he had once commanded respect with a single glance. Catherine, meanwhile, read the headlines in silence from her parents' home in Westchester. Her father cursed under his breath. Her mother handed her a cup of tea and said nothing, just rested a hand on Catherine's shoulder. The images of James's private texts were humiliating even for her. And yet, as she touched her growing belly, feeling the stirrings of two tiny lives, within a strange peace settled over her. She hadn't asked for this chaos, but she had survived it. Her sons would be born into strength, not scandal, into truth, not secrecy. Later that week, James requested a final meeting with Catherine and their respective attorneys. They met in a private office at Geraldine Pierce's law firm. James looked thinner, paler. His voice cracked as he spoke. "I'm ready to agree to your terms," he said. "You can have the penthouse. I'll set up a trust fund for the boys. I'll even transfer a portion of my shares pending board approval." Catherine said nothing for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Thank you." He glanced at her. The pain in his eyes undeniable. "I'm so sorry, Catherine. For everything, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to do what's right now." Her face didn't soften, but her voice did. "This isn't about you anymore. James, it's about them." As the lawyers discussed the technicalities, Catherine kept her focus on the future. There would be no going back, but at least now she was facing forward with clarity, with control, and with two little heartbeats pushing her onward. After months of legal wrangling, depositions, and mediation sessions, the divorce settlement was finally hammered out. Catherine received generous financial support, a portion of shares in Harrington Industries, and full legal custody of the twins, with James granted visitation rights and a structured co-parenting plan. The settlement was sealed by a judge, making it official shortly after Catherine gave birth to two healthy boys, Alexander and Nicholas Harrington. She held them both in her arms at the hospital, tears mixing with a surprising sense of peace. She no longer felt overshadowed by heartbreak. She was their mother, strong and determined to give them a stable life. James visited the hospital the day after their birth. He stood by Catherine's bedside, staring at his newborn sons with awe. For a moment, the tension between them dissolved, replaced by the shared miracle of life. He gently cradled Alexander, then Nicholas, tears sliding down his cheeks. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, voice choked with regret or for everything. Catherine offered a small nod. Not quite forgiveness, but acknowledgement that they shared a bond that went beyond betrayal. "They need their father," she said softly, "even if we can't be together." James thanked her, understanding that it was the closest thing to an olive branch she could offer for now. In the weeks that followed, James remained on leave from Harrington Industries town. Gossip hinted that he might step down permanently. Others speculated he was aiming for a slow comeback. Catherine, meanwhile, focused on motherhood, aided by her parents and a small team of caretakers. She rarely responded to James's texts beyond logistical concerns about the twins' appointments, but she appreciated that he tried to be present for his sons. Elena vanished from the scene. Rumors suggested she moved back to Argentina. A cryptic social media post from her mother's account mentioned Elena was recuperating from emotional distress. Some said she planned to write a tell-all book, others that she'd turned to a quiet life away from the public eye. Regardless, her once grand dream of becoming a trophy wife to a wealthy American businessman had turned to ash months, slipped into a year. Catherine observed James's interactions with the twins, noticing genuine warmth and a desire to change. He seemed more grounded, more humble, carefully building a relationship with his sons. Catherine, while still nursing deep wounds, found her anger gradually receding. She might never fully forgive him for the betrayal, but she recognized that the father of her children was trying to do right by them now. Through the labyrinth of heartbreak, betrayal, legal warfare, and shattered illusions, each person involved had lost something and gained something else. For Catherine, she lost the fairy tale marriage she once cherished, but gained the clarity, independence, and unwavering love of her twin boys. For James, he lost his spotless reputation and nearly lost his role at Harrington Industries. But he finally understood that honesty and loyalty meant more than any quick thrill. For Elena, she lost the chance to marry into wealth and power, learning the hard way that ambition tainted by manipulation often leads to downfall. In the end, the Harrington divorce became a cautionary tale whispered about in Manhattan's upper crust. People learned that even the rich and powerful couldn't hide from their own shadows forever. Secrets have a way of leaking into the light, and when they do, no fortress, no matter how lavish, can truly protect you from the consequences of your choices. Love and betrayal can lead us down unpredictable paths, and in the end, the choices we make reveal who we truly are. Catherine found the strength to protect her twins. James faced the consequences of his affair, and Elena faded into the shadows of the scandal she helped create. Their journey reminds us that trust is fragile, that shortcuts to power can end in heartbreak, and that redemption requires more than a simple apology. If this dramatic story of ambition, heartbreak, and unexpected new beginnings moved you, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Share it with friends who love a real lifestyle drama filled with twists and secrets. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more enthralling tales and cautionary stories. You never know whose hidden world will unravel next. Thank you for watching, and see you in our next captivating video.